I don't know how to not be overly critical, which is not what I intend, which is not, like, my intention, but I guess that's just what, I guess that's just gonna happen. To put it mildly, on that note, Resident Evil 7 is still absolutely my game of the year and probably won't change. That Resident Evil 7, easily better to me or for me than Breath of the Wild. And here, like, I don't understand. Like, again, Breath of the Wild is a good game. It's not like a bad game. But what the are all of these 10 out of 10 reviews? This is not a 10 out of 10 game. It's not a 10 out of 10 game at all. 10 out of 10 production value, maybe, other than the voice acting, which some of the voice acting's, like, bad. I cannot understand the 10 out of 10 scores. Anyone who's giving Breath of the Wild a 10 out of 10 is in the honeymoon phase, and they're looking at the game with rose-tinted glasses, and they are choosing to ignore the major flaws of the game. I love the open world. Love the open world. But they needed to have traditional Zelda dungeons. And because they didn't have that, that means that even though it's a good game, it's not a good Zelda game. And that's what matters if you buy a Zelda game. There's an expectation that when you buy a Zelda game, you're buying a game that's going to have these really creative, unique dungeons. And this game did not have that. It has a lot of mini dungeons, and they're all, like, the shrines are cool. I like the shrines. The shrines are awesome. But that's window dressing. The substance was not there. And that the Divine Beasts, I don't consider those to be dungeons. You can beat them in 5 to 15 minutes. Every single one of them. I know where to go to all the things in Ocarina of Time to complete those dungeons. But it still is going to take like 20 minutes to a half an hour to beat all those, because you just have to go around. And like, let's talk about the visual style. The Water Temple is water-themed. The Fire Temple is fire-themed. And the Arbiter's Grounds is this like crypt out in the desert. And they all look distinct from each other, and they're all very creative. The Divine Beasts all look exactly the same. The Zora one looks the same as the Desert one, looks the same as the Death Mountain one, looks the same as the Rito one. And let's talk about boss battles. One of the things that, starting with Twilight Princess, that really, like, impressed me was like, wow, you know what? These boss battles are getting really creative. Let's talk about the Arbiter's Grounds. In the Arbiter's Grounds, you get the spinning top item. So for that item, to beat that boss, there are two parts to it. One of them, you have like, you're essentially skiing down a sand slope to hit the spine of this dragon skeleton coming out of the ground. And as you hit it, he tries to stop you with his, arms or whatever, and then as you get successive hits on it, he summons like zombie whatevers that'll block you from getting to it. So you have to become increasingly more precise in order to hit him. And then the second part of the fight, his head comes off and is flying through the air, and you have to jump from track to track with the spinning top to get all the way up to the top of the platform, and then you jump off and hit him in the head with the like, it was a really cool thing. And then say like the boss battle with the double hook shots, and you're using the double hook shots to climb all your way up to hit this dragon or whatever, and then you get to the top and there's all these flying little things you can latch onto, so you're going from thing to hit it. It was like really super duper creative. The boss battles were able to be creative because each dungeon had a unique item that was featured as the method to beat the boss. And it was really cool. Now, it was very scripted, but it was a really great experience, and it was a really memorable experience. In Breath of the Wild, the bosses in the Divine Beasts, it's just timed dodges. It's just so plain. It's so plain. There's no flavor to those fights. There's no flavor at all. The gameplay just not... It plays well, but it could have been so much better. You know how I was cheesing my way through most of these dungeons? By the purest of accidents, I went to the bird place first, and I happened to get Rivali's Gale that allowed me to like jump up 50 feet in the air. How many puzzles did we cheese through by jumping over stuff? That's terrible design. That's terrible design. And then I started to realize, like, as the credits were rolling, most of the time I spent playing that game was running to places, not actually doing stuff. I spent more time running around than I did in Shrines or in the Beasts or whatever. Kind of boring. And what did some people complain about Wind Waker? Oh, you spent all this... Yeah, there's so much stuff to discover, but you're sailing from place to place, and the getting from place to place is boring. Well, you know what? It's kind of boring in Breath of the Wild, too. And, like, for all, like, oh, there's, camps of moblins and stuff. You know what? That's just copy-pasted shit. If some people really earnestly believe that this game is a 10 out of 10, then good for them. Good for them. I'm glad they really enjoyed it. But for anyone that's saying it's a 10 out of 10, you need to have a real good f***ing reason why you think the game is a perfect game. 10 out of 10 means flawless. Someone needs to explain to me how Breath of the Wild has 0 flaws. And here's the thing. I won't necessarily say if you rate something a 10 out of 10, that means the game is flawless, but the experience needs to be flawless. For you. For me, say like Tales of Symphonia is a 10 out of 10, because it was a flawless experience for me. If I'm being overly critical, I would say that the story's bananas. The overworld looks like it was drawn with a crayon by a child with no arms and no feet and no head. There are flaws in that game, but the flaws do not take away from the experience. Anyone who gave Breath of the Wild a 10 out of 10 needs to explain how they are okay with a Zelda game that has no dungeons. Someone responded to me on Twitter saying something to the effect of, Breath of the Wild has some of the best dungeons in the series and has like 100 of them. And I said, then you and me have a different definition of what a dungeon is. A dungeon needs to be memorable. I finished the game yesterday, and I already don't remember, like, anything from the Divine Beast. And all the boss fights are timed dodge, timed dodge, timed dodge, and then just wail on the boss with something. If they combined that open world that they made with traditional Zelda dungeons, then boom. Then maybe I'm considering giving this game a 10 out of 10. In Breath of the Wild, because of the fact that everything can be done in any order, each of those beasts, there's no like, hey, you've done blah, 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 or you don't get to see the world change as you do things. Sure, the areas that you do stuff in change. Like, the weather is different and people will say different things to you, but I did not feel a sense of, hey, I'm getting close to my goal. In a game where the open world is cool, and where the visual style is cool, and I like the sound design quite a bit, like, all of the production value, other than the voice acting, is really, really good. And the open world is really, really good. But they forgot to include the fundamental ingredient of a Zelda game, and that's dungeons. And because it's lacking the main ingredient, it doesn't matter how good all the other stuff is. I cannot understand it. I cannot understand someone legitimately thinking that this is a flawless game. Especially a flawless Zelda game. People are like, oh my god, this redefined what Zelda is. I'm like, did it? I mean, yeah, it did. Apparently, now Zelda means no dungeons. Super.